In the 19th century, European encroachment into West Africa gained pace, and in 1890, King Behanzin started fighting French forces in the course of the First Franco-Dahomean War. In 1892, the French invaded the kingdom of Dahomey and were met by a fierce army of women warriors who repelled them in hand-to-hand combat. This is the story of the Dahomey female warriors, an all-female military regiment of the Kingdom of Dahomey in today's Benin Republic in West Africa. The warriors existed from the 17th century until the late 19th century. They were named Amazons by the Europeans who encountered them due to the story of the female warriors of Amazons in Greek mythology. But as for me, I choose to call them the Agojie.
Agojie! Agojie!
Before we continue the story, I want to say thank you to my first 1,000 YouTube subscribers. And I also want to call out Lovette Kamso, the subscriber who has made the highest comments on my channel. Join me as I journey to the 5,000 subscribers milestone. If this is your first time on this channel, click the subscribe button and push me closer to the milestone. I appreciate your support. From the 1600s through the 19th century, West Africa was home to a succession of sophisticated and powerful kingdoms. As in Europe, Asia and the Americas, during this time, rival powers in West Africa waged bloody wars for economic, political and cultural dominance. For centuries, the Kingdom of Dahomey was the wealthiest and most feared of these West African powers, and Dahomey became famous for its elite army of women warriors called the Agojie, whom European observers dubbed the Dahomey Amazons, after their fictional counterparts in Greek myths. The emergence of an all-female military regiment was the result of Dahomey's male population facing high casualties in the increasingly frequent violence and warfare with neighboring West African states. This led to Dahomey being one of the leading states in the slave trade with the Oyo Empire, which used slaves for commodity exchange in West Africa until the slave trade in the region ended. The lack of men likely led the kings of Dahomey to recruit women into the army. But while the Agojie, the world's only all-female army, were immensely brave and skilled warriors, King Ghezo and the Dahomey kingdom gained much of its wealth from raiding rival kingdoms and selling millions of captives to the Portuguese traders between 1640 and 1860. The Agojie were critical to the success of these slave capturing raids. After the slave trade ended in the mid-19th century, Dahomey's storyline changed, and the Agojie were indeed able to play the role of freedom fighters. Enemies at that time were French colonizers who wanted to seize control of West Africa. As always, the Agojie fought courageously for their king, but their story didn't have a happy ending. According to oral histories passed down through the centuries, the first Dahomean king settled in modern-day Benin in the early 1600s. King Hubaja built the Dahomean capital in Dahomey, about 80 miles inland from the Atlantic coast. The story goes that he formed a special band of female elephant hunters, possibly the earliest predecessors of the Agojie. Next came Hubaja's son, King Akaba, who placed thousands of uniformed female fighters at the rear of his army as it marched into battle. The women weren't meant to fight, not at first at least, but the sight of such a large and organized army intimidated Dahomey's weaker rivals. What a strategy! Let me know what you think about the strategy in the comment section. When Akaba died unexpectedly, his twin sister Tasi Hangbe was quietly installed as regent or queen. After Queen Hangbe's brief reign, King Ajaba came to power and significantly expanded Dahomey's routes in the Atlantic slave trade. King Ajaba was followed by his son, King Tebesu, who reorganized the royal court to achieve a kind of gender balance that was centuries ahead of its time. He implemented the Bojito, which was a female reignmate of the king. Bojito, Hanjile and King Tebesu ruled together, balancing the power between males and females. This ideology endured until the end of the Dahomey kingdom. But it wasn't until the 19th century reign of King Ghezo and his successor, King Ghezo, that Dahomey's female fighters officially became the Agojie, a standing army of thousands of celibate women warriors who lived in the palace and became infamous for their ruthlessness in battle. In 1861, a Portuguese missionary watched thousands of Agojie scale a wall of thorn-covered acacia branches and ignored their painful wounds as they executed a vicious mock attack on a village. And in 1889, a French naval officer witnessed a young Agojie recruit named Naniska, who was ordered to execute a prisoner to prove her ruthlessness as an Agojie. She walked dashingly to the prisoner, swung her sword 3 times with both hands, and then calmly cut the last flesh that attached the head to the body. She then squeezed the blood off her weapon and swallowed it. The horrors of the Atlantic slave trade predates the kingdom of Dahomey, but as soon as Dahomean kings captured the coastal part of Oida in the early 1700s, they became actively involved in the lucrative industry of buying and selling human beings. Oida was situated on a large bay known as the Bight of Benin, which was one of the most active slave ports in West Africa. From 1640 to 1860, roughly 2 million people were exported from the Bight of Benin into slavery, equaling 1/5 of all enslaved Africans who were shipped off to plantations in Brazil, the Caribbean, and the North America. The kingdom of Dahomey was responsible for capturing and selling most of these individuals into slavery at the rates of 7,000 to 15,000 each year. And by the reigns of King Ghezo and King Ghezo, when the Agojie constituted a standing army of 6,000 female fighters, women warriors were leading many of the fearsome raids that captured and kidnapped countless enemies for sale into slavery. In exchange for captives, Dahomean kings were paid in imported goods like tobacco and rum from Brazil and the Caribbean, clothes from India, cowries from Maldives, and manufactured goods from Europe. In the 19th century, every European power wanted a piece of Africa's wealth, and in 1863, French forces occupied Porto Novo, a port city not far from Oida, and named it a French protectorate, which angered the Dahomeans. Tensions escalated until a war broke out in 1890. The Agojie, armed with outdated rifles and swords, fought with characteristic fearlessness against the French, but even the women's superior training and ferocity were no match for the Europeans' heavy artillery and numbers. They flung themselves on our bayonets with prodigious bravery, reported a soldier with the French Foreign Legion. Neither the cannons nor the canister shots nor the salvo fire stops them. It is really strange to see women so well led, so well disciplined. The Second Franco-Dahomean War was much less successful, and the kingdom of Dahomey was defeated by France. Following this defeat, the Agojie were disbanded. Not much is known about what happened to the female warriors, but it is likely that once under French occupation, they were returned to their hometowns and expected to live traditional lives. Many of the women would go on to have families, something that was forbidden during their time in the Agojie regiment, while others were said to have continued their training with new generations of women in the hopes of keeping the tradition alive. The last woman who was believed to have been an original Agojie died in 1979, aged well over 100 years old. While no original Agojie is alive today, the legacy is continued by their descendants, who continue to tell the stories of their warrior ancestors. I would love to know what you think about the life of the Agojie in the comment section. And don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you.